The flight of the US bombers has absolutely torn through Iran. First, it was the B-2s, which started the inferno and crippled Iran's defenses. Then came the B-1s, which sent flaming fury through the underground bunkers that crisscross Iran's territory. Next up, the B-52s came in and finished the job with sledgehammer strikes that ruined Iran's military regime. This is 3 generations of firepower deployed to systematically destroy Iran. And we're going to reveal exactly what the US did and how it pulled off one of the most suppressive sustained aerial operations in modern military history. It all started with the B-2. The crown jewel of the US bomber fleet, the B-2 was the perfect choice for the shock and awe campaign that kicked off Operation Epic Fury. A multi-role bomber that has world-leading stealth capabilities, the bomber will be able to sneak by Iran's air defenses as those defenses were being systematically destroyed via strikes conducted by US and Israeli fighter jets. And once it reached its targets, the B-2 could unleash a devastating payload of up to 40,000 pounds of munitions. The US had to confront challenges when getting its B-2s into Iranian airspace. With no help from the UK, at least at that point, the B-2 pilots had to fly 30-hour-plus round trips with the aid of aerial tankers, as the bomber's 6,000 nautical mile range wasn't enough to get it to Iran and back. But the US overcame those challenges, coordinated cleverly. Its aerial tankers were precisely where they needed to be, and during this opening salvo of strikes, America's B-2 bombers set the stage for everything that would come later in Operation Epic Fury. How? Well, the aviationist provides some of the details. It says that the US unleashed 4 of its B-2 stealth bombers on Iran on February 28. Those bombers flew over the Strait of Gibraltar en route to their targets, supported by KC-46 refueling tankers that kept them in the sky far longer than they're typically supposed to fly. Once they arrived in Iran, the B-2s did what they do best: drop massive bombs on key military nodes. Fox News' Jennifer Griffin was among the earliest to confirm the involvement of the B-2s in Operation Epic Fury. By way of an unnamed US official, she reported on X that 4 B-2 bombers flew round-trip from the US, dropped dozens of 2,000-pound bombs on underground ballistic missile sites in Iran. This was confirmed by Forces News, which said that the B-2s targeted Iran's hardened ballistic missile facilities during the initial strikes. It also mentions the 2,000-pound bombs, which seem more likely to have been Blue 109s attached to JDAMs. These bunker busters have been in use since Operation Desert Storm, meaning we started to see some cross-generational firepower being deployed from the very opening hours of the operation. More generational divides would be crossed in the days that followed, but we'll get to that soon. While there are no specifics about the types of hardened ballistic missile sites that the B-2s struck during the first few hours of the operation, we can surmise that they were likely the underground missile cities that Iran has touted many times in the past. These massive bunkers are used as both storage sites for Iran's ballistic missiles and as launching points, due to the many entrances and exits built into them. The B-2s weren't tasked with destroying the missile cities themselves. That's too large a task for 2,000-pound bombs. But what the B-2s could do was use their bunker busters to cave in tunnels, collapse entrances, and essentially turn the missile cities into massive tombs for the missiles that form the backbone of Iran's entire military doctrine. And that's what they did, to devastating effect. By the end of the first 24 hours of the operation, America's B-2 bombers, along with its stealth fighter jets and Israel's airframes, had struck over 1,000 targets all across Iran. Beyond the hardened ballistic missile sites, the first 24 hours saw the destruction of command and control facilities used by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, along with Iranian ships, submarines, and air defense systems. Iran's military infrastructure was systematically dismantled during a shock and awe set of strikes that left the Iranian high command reeling. Some of Iran's leaders didn't make it, including the supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He was one of the earliest casualties of the joint US and Israeli operation, with his death plunging Iran into a situation where it had to deal with a leadership crisis on top of the sheer amount of firepower being unleashed upon it. Fast forward to March 4th, and we also start seeing the impact of America's initial B-2 strikes on Iran's ability to wage war. By that point, Iranian ballistic missile launches were down 86% compared to what they had been on February 28th. And the crumbling missile facilities targeted by America's B-2s were a huge part of the reason why. More would be coming for Iran, a lot more. But with this initial wave of strikes, the US sent a very clear message to Iran's regime. The B-2 was in play, and Iran hadn't ever seen it coming. That's the entire point of a stealth bomber. And as the 4 B-2s that the US deployed made their multi-thousand-mile trips back to the bases from which they'd flown, Iran must have been wondering what on earth the US could unleash next that could be anywhere near as bad as what it had just sent Iran's way. As we now know, the B-2 strikes were just the beginning. With its crown jewel bombers safely back home, the US decided to skip back a generation. Iran's air defenses had already been crippled so enormously that the need for stealth was no longer as much of a factor as it had been during the first day. That meant the follow-up waves of attacks could be delivered by a different bomber entirely, the B-1B Lancer. Older doesn't mean incapable when it comes to America's bomber fleet, and the US proved just that on March 1st and March 2nd, when it used its B-1s to unleash a firestorm of follow-up strikes against Iran. The 2 days that followed the initial B-2 strikes saw the US dip into its Cold War arsenal for the follow-up, and when you hear the specifications for the B-1, you'll know why. Sure, the bomber doesn't have the stealth capabilities of its newer cousin, but what it does have is the ability to fly at supersonic speeds, making it one of the fastest bombers that the US has, along with the ability to carry a staggering 75,000 pounds of ordnance. So if the B-2 came in quietly and delivered precision strikes against Iran's hardened targets, the B-1 was deployed to unleash explosive hell during the next few waves. Among the weapons that a B-1 can carry are JDAMs, cruise missiles including the AGM-158 JASSM, and cluster munitions. The first two on that list seem likely to be what the B-1s used in early March, as they provide the ability to strike from standoff range, minimizing the already small threat posed by Iran's remaining air defenses, while also ensuring that plenty of firepower was delivered to the targets that the US wanted to hit. As for those targets, the Jerusalem Post reports that a trio of B-1 bombers followed up on the B-2 strikes. Like the B-2s, the older bombers had to be refueled in the air as they made their trips from Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota without any stops. US Central Command, or CENTCOM, revealed what the bombers hit in a March 2nd X-post, accompanied by a video of B-1s taking off. Last night, US B-1 bombers struck deep inside Iran to degrade Iranian ballistic missile capabilities. As the president stated, "We're going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground," CENTCOM declared, telling us that this was a direct follow-up. The B-2s shattered the missile cities. The B-1s came in to take out whatever was missed the first time around in multiple follow-up waves that Iran could do nothing about. Interesting engineering adds that the B-1s arrived in Iran to serve as a high-capacity strike platform that fit perfectly into the wide network of air power that the US already has flying over the country. As America's fighter jets, from its F-15s up to its stealthy F-35s, worked to establish air superiority by taking out even more of Iran's air defenses, the B-1s arrived, unleashed massive volumes of precision munitions against their targets, and then flew back home. This was a 1-2 punch delivered over 3 days that we've already revealed took a massive bite out of Iran's ballistic missile capabilities. And by the end of the third day of Operation Epic Fury, Iran was dealing with a lot more than that. But while we're on this, here's a quick reminder that you are watching The Military Show, and we break it down like this every single week. Hit subscribe if you want more of this kind of insight. Now, beyond the damage to Iran's ballistic missile sites caused by the B-2s and B-1s, Iran's entire military network was struggling by the end of March 2nd. US President Donald Trump made that abundantly clear when he declared that all of Iran's air defenses were gone, along with its navy, air force, and leadership. While perhaps a touch overly ambitious a claim, it's not too far off the truth. As B-1s wrecked more of Iran's missile capabilities, fighter jets were zipping around Iran, taking out air defenses and other military assets. Command and control centers remained as targets, with each one taken down, contributing to the decline in Iranian missile launches. After all, it's not much use having missiles and launchers when orders aren't coming down the pipe to tell you what to hit. And with each B-1 strike, Iran's launch options were whittled down even further. By March 5th, the number of targets that the US had struck had risen to over 2,000, which included more than 20 Iranian warships that had been taken out of commission. The strikes were precise, well-coordinated, designed specifically to collapse the inner workings of the Iranian military while systematically depriving it of the weapon capabilities that it needed to put up anything even resembling a fight against the US. And more was coming. By this point, the US had established air superiority over Iran. And with that superiority comes the ability to send more types of airframes into the fight. The US did just that. With the precision work done by the B-2s and B-1s in multiple waves, America switched its strategy to one of sustained attrition. From March 3rd to now, the US has been whittling away at what's left of Iran's military infrastructure with sustained attacks that haven't given Iran any room at all to breathe. To maintain those attacks, the US unleashed the oldest bomber in its arsenal, the B-52 Stratofortress. The mother of all American bombers, the B-52 has been around for about 70 years, and it's still as effective now as it was during the 1950s, as long as it's used in the right circumstances. And those circumstances were created in Iran by the waves of strikes conducted by the B-2s and B-1s. Since those early waves of attacks, the US has unleashed a bomber that can fly up to 9,000 miles without the need for refueling. With the UK allowing the use of its bases from March 1st, the US also didn't have to worry about its older bomber flying round trip anymore. They could land at RAF Fairford, refuel, and then head on to attack Iran. Attack is what the B-52 does better than almost any bomber in the world. According to the US Air Force, the B-52 is capable of dropping or launching the widest array of weapons out of any airframe that the US has in its current arsenal. The bomber has also been tweaked and upgraded over the years, with adaptations made to its engines, likely to see it in service through to 2050. There's a lot of life in this old dog yet, along with the ability to unleash 70,000 pounds of ordnance at targets, and Iran has been feeling the pain of sustained B-52 strikes since March 3rd. CENTCOM confirmed the use of B-52s on March 3rd, and their job has been to deliver sledgehammer blow after sledgehammer blow to Iran. Precision isn't out of the window. The B-52s are still hitting very specific targets, but a bombing campaign that initially focused on Iran's ballistic missile launch capacity has been expanded to include any military target that is within range of the B-52s that are being sent into the country. The establishment of local air superiority has also allowed America's bombers to hit Iran's missile production facilities. So as Iran burns through the missiles that it's still able to launch, it's going to have a very hard time replacing them. Command and control centers are still on the docket, Military Times reports, and the B-52s now being in continuous use means that Iran's military infrastructure has gone from crumbling to almost non-existent. And of course, yet more firepower also means that far more targets have been hit. By March 11th, the US was claiming that it had struck over 5,500 targets in Iran. For context, that's not too far below 500 targets per day, and it shows you what we mean when we say the arrival of the B-52s has signaled a switch to sustained attrition. Remember we told you earlier that the US was claiming to have hit about 2,000 targets by March 5th. Tack a week's worth of B-52 strikes on top of everything else that the US is delivering with its fighter jets, and you get another 3,500. This is constant pressure. The B-2s laid the table, the B-1s served up the food, and the B-52s are making sure that Iran's regime chokes on every last morsel. The UK is now playing a key role in the sustainment of this pressure, as Forbes reported on March 11th. America's B-52s are striking Iran from the UK, the outlet reports. We know that there are at least 3 B-52s at RAF Fairford, which are likely flying in rotation to ensure that there is always one of these massive bombers in the skies over Iran at any given time. More could arrive if the US chooses. The US Air Force says that it has 58 active B-52s in its inventory, along with another 18 that are in reserve. Even with the 3 that are in the UK now, that amounts up to 210,000 pounds of ordnance in constant rotation. The US could easily increase the number of B-52s active in Iran to 5 or 10, which would take what is already a dire situation for the country's regime and turn it into an absolute catastrophe. Could it possibly get any worse for Iran? Well, we think you might have already guessed the answer to that question. With the UK bases now in play, the US isn't limiting itself to B-52s. The more valuable B-1s and B-2s that were being risked on massive round-trip sorties are now being used to hit Iran hard, even as the B-52s maintain the sustained attrition campaign that they set up. We'll start with the B-1s. According to the Warzone or TWZ, a staggering 15 American bombers are now flying strike missions against Iran from RAF Fairford in the UK. Among those bombers, which includes the B-52s we mentioned earlier, are B-1s that have been filmed preparing for new missions in Iran. TWZ reported on this footage on March 11, stating that it showcases B-1s being loaded with AGM-158 JASSMs, along with JDAMs equipped with the Blue 109 2,000-pound bunker busters that we mentioned earlier. Missile delivery systems are also being removed from the B-1s, which is yet another signal that the US has attained complete air supremacy over Iran. No missile delivery system also means that the B-1s aren't going to be firing cruise missiles. And that means that the US isn't worried about keeping its bombers in standoff range anymore. TWZ adds that the bomber force amassed at RAF Fairford now includes 3 B-52s and 12 B-1Bs, suggesting that the Stratofortress is going to be taking a back seat to the B-1 in the sustained attrition campaign over the coming days. The outlet also theorizes that the US will be targeting large industrial complexes in Iran, including weapons production facilities and sites related to Iran's nuclear weapons program. Perhaps that's why the Blue 109s are coming back into play. Those bunker busters are coming back to take out even more hardened targets. Then there are the B-2s. The US is a little more secretive about how it's been using its ultra-modern bombers following the February 28th flurry of strikes. However, March 11th also saw TWZ report that B-2s may have conducted a strike against Iran's Talagan-2 nuclear site using GBU-57B massive ordnance penetrator bombs, A significant step up from the Blue 109s that the B-2s used in February, these bunker busters weigh 30,000 pounds, can penetrate much deeper, and explode with so much force that they destroy anything in their path. As for the evidence that they've been deployed, PWZ shares satellite images from Vantor, which shows what has happened at Taliban 2. In the wake of Operation Midnight Hammer, which was the joint US and Israeli mission that targeted Iran's nuclear facilities back in the summer of 2025, Iran's regime has been hard at work trying to protect this base. Concrete appears to have been layered over the top of it, along with massive mounds of soil, which combine to form a shield the Blue 109s can't penetrate. But that doesn't matter. In the most recent satellite photo from the site, we can see 3 very distinct and precise holes in the soil above Taliban 2. That tells us one thing: the US unleashed its 30,000-pound bombs, and the B-2 would have been the bomber that used it. There is simply no let-up for Iran right now. Just when the regime thinks that the US has done the bulk of the damage that it's going to do, more comes. B-52s are still flying sorties. But now 12 B-1Bs are in the UK, and they're being loaded with bombs and bunker busters, telling us that the US has found yet more targets. And as these 2 bombers focus on strategic and sustained attrition, the B-2s are clearly taking to the air again. 3 holes at an underground nuclear bunker tell us that much. More will come. Much more. The only question now is how much of this can Iran's regime, along with its military and nuclear infrastructure, take before it has to submit to America's bomber blitz? We'll have to wait a while longer for the answer to that question. However, America's clear superiority in this conflict seems to have turned what could have been a trigger for World War III into a one-sided beating against Iran. But there are other conflicts that could lead to the start of a global war, 5 of them, in fact, all of which could ignite in 2026. Find out what they are in our video. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more coverage of what the US is doing during Operation Epic Fury. And thank you for watching.